Hey, you guys, and welcome to this week's episode of the Pantry Chat, Food for Thought. This week, I have another really special guest here with me. I'm really excited about what we're going to talk about today because we're going to be talking about something that's kind of near and dear to my heart. Can you tell that's a pattern for these? We do interviews on things that get me excited and that are really near and dear to my heart. And that is deep nutritional eating by eating nose to tail on the whole animal and talking about eating organ meats. And I have somebody who, as soon as I saw his biography, as soon as I saw what he did and what he's created, I got so excited because I feel like it is a key to getting organ meats into our family's diet and really boosting the nutrition, which is so needed in today's world. So welcome to Chef James Berry. Welcome. Hello. Welcome to the Pantry Chat. And thank you for being here today.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to talk with you.
So when I introduce you as Chef James Berry, you are seriously a chef. Like, you are a professional private chef is where your background lies. Is that correct?
Yeah, I know. It's even hard for me to believe sometimes. I grew up where the smoke detector, when it went off, we knew dinner was ready. So my mom is still to this day kind of shocked that she has a chef for a son. But yeah, I went to culinary school in New York, and I went specifically to be a private chef. I never wanted to work at a restaurant. And it's coming out a lot in the news lately, I've been finding, but I've never found the environment within the restaurant to be conducive towards health. I call chefs in restaurants like the pirates of the modern world. It's a really hard life, and they are a unique subset of their own. And I just knew I was like, no, I want to be a private chef. I want to really support people's health. So that's what I focused on.
Yeah. Restaurants are kind of brutal places. I worked in one for working through college, high school and college, and it was a lovely restaurant and it was low stress, but even the low stress kind, it's not the kind of place that is necessarily good for your health, especially on stress levels. So yeah, totally understand that. Now, you are like most of us in your childhood, like you grew up with maybe not the best food. So talk about your childhood a little bit, what your experiences and what got you from there to here.
Yeah, I grew up in the early 70s, but it's funny, like I feel like I was eating very 50s diet. It was like frozen peas, shake and bake chicken or pork or something like that, but shake and bake if you're old enough to know that stuff. And then like a baked potato, it was so kind of just restrictive and just, I don't know. I look back at it and I realized how kind of plain it was on a certain level. And I think actually most Americans are kind of raised with a very standard American diet, very kind of plain palate. And that's kind of why I'm so excited as I've, stepped into adulthood over the years and kind of got more adventurous with my palate. Now I have to say I'm still a slightly picky eater, but I've definitely improved. But I grew up we ate meat, but very specific cuts of meat. Did not explore, like I didn't have my first taco till I was in college. I didn't explore a lot of ethnic foods. I was like the ultimate picky eater. Yeah.
And it's, what we're finding on the other side of that, of a whole generation of people who are raised that way, essentially, is that turns out we were actually lacking a lot of nutrition, right?
Yeah.
Like our body needs those other things that we didn't eat or we weren't raised on. Luckily, my mom did not ever fall into any box whatsoever of the way people did things around her. And so she was feeding us liver, and she had a garden and we had like Swiss chard every night right out of the garden. So we were very blessed, but the people around us did not think the way we ate was normal. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Now, so you actually willingly ate it? It wasn't a fight for the kids to eat it when you were growing up?
There are stories about me. I'd get fussy as a baby right at dinner time. And so when I was very young, they would just stick spinach and liver and whatever they were having for dinner into a blender. And she talks about getting a bottle, because they didn't have sippy cups back then, really,
Right.
like real ones like we have now. And she would get a hot needle and just open up the nipple on the bottle so that you could suck more stuff through it. And so the earliest stories of me eating liver and spinach smoothies for dinner, and how much
Wow.
I would like that. So I'm a rare case. I don't think I'm a normal in that particular experience.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, I mean, most people, I mean, particularly here in America, I look at the palette sort of like like colors of a wheel, you know?
Mhm.
And so if we were to, we have our 4 established flavors. We have our salty, sweet, we have our bitter and our sour, and then there's a 5th called umami. Those are the 5 kind of identified flavors or tastes that we have in our palate. And in America, we really skew towards salty and sweet. You know, if you think about it, almost everything is salty or sweet. And so that's where you find people, kids particularly, we gravitate towards those things. I remember, and maybe this was you too, or definitely people listening, I'm sure you're going to identify with this, but I grew up like eating Skippy peanut butter. Like at Skippy, if you transition to eating regular peanut butter where that doesn't have sugar and everything else in it, you realize how much like Skippy is really like candy. It's like truly, it's just so sweet. But when that's all you're doing, and people that only drink sodas will identify with this. When you transition to something that doesn't have that sugar in it, let's say for people drinking soda, they suddenly go to water, or for me, with Skippy, going to Laurel Shutters. I think that was the natural peanut butter then. It all tastes so plain, and you're like,
Yeah.
ugh, why is this? This is so gross. And it's really, it's not because those foods are gross. It's because our palate is so out of whack, And so much of what I did, when I was first starting out as a chef, was I was supporting people in recalibrating their palate to actually get them to taste the way, taste food as it really tastes, versus in those ultra processed, skewed, flavor modes that we're all acclimated to.
And that's a real process to actually go through. And I know that. I remember the first time I drank kombucha, and I've told this story a few times. Somebody had randomly, like a checker at the grocery store, had said, "Hey, I've been drinking the kombucha, just having random conversations with people. You should try it. It's really good." And so I went and I got this and I took a sip and I was like, "Oh my gosh, it's gone bad." Like, I thought there was something wrong with it.
Right.
And then I put it in the fridge and I had another sip the next day. And by the next day, I was like, I don't know why, but I kind of want a few sips of that thing. And by the third day, it was like my body recognized that has something in it that you need and you want it. But it took a while to
Yeah.
convince my palate and my tongue that I wanted the nutrition that I needed.
Yeah. Well, you're tapping that sour, right? Like kombucha, basically, anything cultured is going to kind of bring in a little bit more sour to your diet, from yogurts to cultured veg to kombucha. And absolutely, that. But yet, you mentioned it took a while, but really it was just a few days, right?
Yeah.
It's like, I think that's really important for people to realize, is you can change your palate within like 2 weeks.
Mm.
Like I've literally gotten people off sugar in 2 weeks, and their entire palate changes. They go from, maybe drinking 3 glasses of wine a night to barely being able to finish half a glass, all because their palate's changed. And now they're realizing how sweet that wine is. So
Mm.
it's a really important process. I mean, I think that we really need to focus not only on our own palate, but particularly as we're raising kids, is to really expose them to as many of those flavors as possible, which I didn't know this when I was creating Pluck, which is an organ-based seasoning that is umami. So it has that 5th unique taste that I mentioned earlier. When I created Pluck, I didn't know that's what it would do, but I'm continuing to get more and more reports of parents telling me, "Oh yeah, my kid was so picky, and then I started putting Pluck on their food, and now they're becoming more adventurous." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, we're changing them through their palate."
That is just so interesting. And I've seen that with my own children too,
You
that,
have.
you can really make these adjustments. and you can change their taste basis, and it's really interesting, change their palate. But let's just jump right in and talk about Pluck, because this is how I met you, is actually finding this product. And it was a product that I knew I could get behind as soon as I saw what it was. Like, I got excited about it, but I gotta say, I was so skeptical that it would taste good. But this is essentially a seasoning blend that has been made out of organ meats,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. So
Or
I took
includes organ meats. I don't know how you say it.
yeah. So I took the so we already had freeze dried powdered organ meats. That's a technology we've been using to preserve foods. And the freeze dried powdered organ meats are already shown up in capsules. But see, I'm a big fan. So obviously, I'm a big fan of whole animal nutrition, but I'm also a big fan of eating our nutrition versus swallowing it. And the main way that people have been really eating organ meats within the last, I don't know, last 50 years is they've either been literally eating the organ meats, bloody organ meats, cooking them or whatnot, or taking capsules. And it seemed to be more and more skewed towards doing capsules. And I was like, I just feel like we're missing the point here. Not only are we not eating enough organ meats, but then we're swallowing that nutrition versus eating it. And when we swallow nutrition, it's a delayed response. So when you eat food or anything, you're basically working with the natural digestive process. You get saliva, it coats the food, it starts to get your stomach ready to digest. Just when you actually start chewing, you're breaking down the foods. The saliva helps to digest, and your body, the minute it even touches your tongue, your body is saying, I want more of this or less. And we can all identify with that when you think of salt, right? If you put salt on your tongue, your body will say, yes, give me more, or will say, no, 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 I'm done. This doesn't taste good, no more. And that's really your body communicating to you that I need more sodium or I don't need more sodium, right? But when you take a salt tablet, maybe 20, 30 minutes later, you get a delayed response. Why am I feeling so bloated? Oh, I got too much salt. So one is working immediate communication and working with your body. And the other is guesswork. It's like, how much of this do I really need? I don't know. Let's just swallow 3 tablets. Oh, or 3 capsules. Oh, now I'm feeling nauseous. Maybe I got too much of something I didn't. You know what I mean? So I'm just all about you work with what we're given, and the more natural we can be, the better. That's why I'm always like, with all the trends, I've been in this business over 18 years, and trends come and go. But you know which trend doesn't come and go, which is constant? It's eating real food. And that's the message, right? We eat real food. That is bottom line what we should all be doing. Moving as much as we can away from these ultra processed foods, from, looking for magic pills, magic diets. It's like, life is hard enough, stick to real food. But so organ meats though were key, and we're not eating them. I sort of identified 3 main issues. We think they're going to taste icky because most of us didn't get raised with them like you did. And and then those that did were forced to eat them. So there's a lot of trauma around it, which is interesting. And then there's the sourcing, like I don't know where to source them. And then the third is I don't know how to cook them. Like they seem intimidating. And so I was really out to get these nutrient dense foods into people's diets to help people, because we are a nutrient deficient society, but we're not a calorie deficient society, which is a really important distinction. We're getting plenty of food. It's not like we're, in Ethiopia, if you remember those commercials from back in the day, and you're seeing these emaciated people, those people did not get enough food. They're not getting the food. We are getting plenty of food. If anything, we're an obese nation. So it's like, how do we fix the food choices we're making? And that's where I came up with Pluck. It was like, okay, how do I get these organ meats in your diet, but get them into you easily and deliciously? And that's where the seasoning concept kind of came into me.
So, excuse me. I love the idea of not only like having this as a way of getting the nutrition into you, but as a way of helping you change your palate. Because, a lot of us, some of us as homesteaders, we've got a freezer full of liver. Like literally, it's sitting there and we just are like, it's just not going down. You know, it's not happening. The kids won't eat it. Nobody will touch it. Most of us aren't drinking smoothie and liver milkshakes for
No.
breakfast. Um, you know, and so we need that step of
Yeah.
transitioning from what we're used to into that. And so I love the idea of actually being able to use this as kind of part of that nutrition to that transition to start signaling our brain that actually this is what I want.
Yeah.
Like, give me more of that. But I find that very interesting because honestly, I don't taste liver when I taste this. Like, I don't. What is in? We've got
What's got
freeze
you got?
dried powdered liver, kidney, heart, and pancreas
Yeah,
in this
5
one.
organs.
And there's different 5 organs. And so that's pretty amazing that you can get all that into here and have it taste so good and help us transition into something that we like. Before we jump too far into that, though, I do want to talk about the organ meats and some cooking tips because some of us do have all of these organs in the freezer. And I want to jump into that first. And then I want to come back to the pluck idea because I think it's phenomenal and it's every bit as good. I've now been eating it quite a bit and we've gone through bag after bag of this stuff. Even though we do have the liver and we are eating the liver, it's like, I'm still putting this on everything and I'm really liking it. But what would be your best tips as a chef for cooking organ meats in a way that the family would actually like? Do you have thoughts on that? Like, let's start with heart because we are actually a big heart eating family. We love heart in our family, which is good.
Yeah.
Um, to me, it tastes just like really good steak, especially when it's fried up in butter with some salt.
Mm.
But do you have any special ways that you prepare it that you find that people like it if you're just like pan cooking it?
Yeah, well, I love that you brought up heart first because I think heart is one of the easiest organs to kind of jump into, mostly for what you said. I mean, it's the closest to a muscle meat, in flavor. And now I find that the kind of easiest entry point of heart is chicken heart. So
Okay.
chicken heart is even milder than the beef, and it really is like it's small. You can cut it up like you would a mushroom. That's what it makes me think of as a mushroom. And I always recommend it's really with organ meats, it's all about not kind of like measuring at what point do you get overwhelmed. So because there's that unfamiliarity factor, right? So for me, like for example, if you get usually when you get organs, they're frozen, usually when you buy them. So you get that, let's say like that beef liver. It's big, it's sometimes about this big. And the idea of a defrosted beef liver is incredibly overwhelming. So what I always recommend people is just get to the point before it's overwhelming. So like, for example, with beef liver, I recommend you don't unfreeze it. You keep it frozen and then you just grate it. Use a box grater and grate it into your ground meats and then put it right back in the freezer. And so, yes, you're using a little bit more at a time, but honestly, you don't need that much. I mean, we don't need to be eating an entire liver every week. It's like you just put a little bit when you make any kind of ground meat and you're good. So that's kind of, I always recommend with any organ that's frozen, try to keep it in that frozen state so it's not overwhelming. With hearts, because the other thing that we have to be aware of is, so one is texture really, and kind of that overwhelm of how volume. The other thing is just our association with organs, like when you see something that's shaped like a heart, like it kind of sometimes brings up that icky thing in people, you just feel a little bit like, I don't know if I want to do this. And so what I recommend also is, and why I like chicken hearts is because you can immediately chop them up and now they don't even look like hearts. Like, so you try to remove, whether it's the look, the texture, you just try to change it up so that it doesn't look like the thing that it is. And so like with chicken hearts, anytime you're making a spaghetti sauce, just treat it literally just like mushrooms. So like usually when you buy some chicken hearts, they're in a container. You get probably about, I don't know, 12 to 15, maybe even 20 in a container. And just pull out like 4 or 5, not too much. Keep the ratio, so it's not dominant,
Mhm.
but like keep a nice ratio, and then chop them up like you would a mushroom and throw them in that sauce. No one will know. And it won't bring up this, like, I think that's probably my simplest direct kind of recommendation is when you're easing into organ meats, don't let them be the center of the plate. Like, let them be a contribution to the plate, an ingredient to the bigger meal. But that said, like, for example, with beef heart, you can make beef heart jerky, you know what I mean? And then it's like, yes, it looks like a strip of meat, but it's so tasty, and you can really like adjust the flavors based on what you marinated in. So I'm a big fan of that. And we have lots of recipes for organ meats on our website at eatpluck.com. Highly recommend people check them out. They're not all from me. I curate them from really talented other, chefs and cooks, and they do a great job. So yeah, I would start with heart. Now, the other one that is another kind of go-to for me is tongue. Beef tongue is also more of a muscle than an organ, even though it's classified as an organ. It's intimidating because of that skin, that sheath that's around it. But I always like to kind of make light of certain things that might feel intimidating. Like, so I don't know if you're someone that is intimidated by tongue, what I would do is then, like, maybe as a family, like when you get that tongue, you like hold it up to your mouth and pretend you're Gene Simmons from Kiss, like make light of it, like have fun with it, so it doesn't feel like so serious, like, oh my God, we're gonna have tongue tonight and I don't know, how it's gonna go. But basically, when you braise that tongue, and you can even just do it you can boil it. You don't have to complicate it too much. But as soon as you boil it for like an hour or an hour and a half, that skin, that hard, that kind of tough outer skin completely peels away. And then underneath you have this really delicate, kind of almost stringy muscle meat. And it's delicious. Like, what I do there is I then like take it and I sometimes fork it and string it like I would like carnitas or something like that. I put some salt on it or some Pluck, and I just stick it right under the broiler. And I let it just kind of crisp up a little bit, not too long because you don't want to burn it, but just a little bit. And it's so good. We have it for taco night all the time.
Tongue is another one that's really favorite in our house. But I remember the first time we were actually butchering our own. Well, we had a butcher come to our house to butcher our own steer that we had raised. And unfortunately, it was right when I was pregnant with somebody, I can't even remember, and
Yeah.
already had morning sickness. And I thinking I'm going to be this big homesteader macho. I didn't even know what homesteading was back then, but we just were doing what we were doing. And I was like, oh, we're going to use all the parts of the cow. And so I asked him, can I have the tongue? And I didn't realize that in the case of that particular butcher, that did not mean it was going to go away with the animal and come back in nice white packages. Some butchers do now do that. But he literally came in the back door, plopped something in my sink and said,
Yeah.
the tongue's ready for you. You just have to scrub it up.
Oh
And
my goodness.
I was not prepared for that
Yeah.
in any way at all, to have that. Just like you said, the sheer size was overwhelming to me to start with. I was like, I had no concept of how big a beef tongue is or how much it feels like a tongue, even when
Yes.
it's
The
in your
texture on the
hands.
outside. It's really that. Yeah, the look, the kind of black and pink, look of the tongue, and then that sheath, that skin is really tough. You
Well,
realize how you
sorry,
realize
when
how
you get
amazing.
over that,
Yeah,
I mean, it is so delicious. It is so good. And
yeah,
we always do that initial braise with like some peppercorns and some, little bit of like cloves thrown in and some mustard and all these, lots of bay and lots of these great spices. And the smell is so amazing. And it's so delicious when you get to eating it, that I think you're very right. That initial psychological reaction to just the substance and the size can be a little bit
yeah. And
challenging.
so,
So
yeah, the key is just kind of um, try to dissect that, or kind of like offset that with making it more manageable, whether it's, like I said, the texture, cutting it up so it doesn't look as much, or don't unfreeze it. So then that way it's not overwhelming.
Right.
But once you start to get past those hurdles, and really to your point, once your palate starts to get acclimated to those more umami flavors that organ meats provide, you'll find you start craving it. Like, that's what's so cool. You actually start to want those parts of the animal. And what's really exciting, for my money, because one of my missions as well is to try to make health like affordable, right? To actually make it so that you don't have to be rich to be healthy, but like, it's like everyone has the opportunity to be healthy. And what I love about the organ meats of the animal is, like, you could have the same 100% grass-fed cow, okay, the same one that's selling, a ribeye for $24.99 in the grocery store. Well, guess what? That tongue from that same cow is only like $6.99. You know what I mean? Or whatever it is. Hopefully you're getting a cow share, so it's even cheaper. But like, point being that you can get the organs for a lot cheaper than the muscle meat, and yet they're more nutritious. In most cases, they have more flavor, like the tongue. The tongue actually tastes better than most of the muscle meat, and it's more nutritious. And of course it's cheaper. So it's just, in my money, or for my money, it's a win-win.
Yeah, that would make sense. Okay. Now, one that I have not cracked the code on is kidney. Like, I
Yes,
have not
kidneys
been able to
challenging.
get myself, like, steak and kidney pie sounds like it's probably great, but I cannot get that thing. I've
Do
tried
you
marinating it in milk, and I've never even gotten past the marinating it in milk because the smell is still so strong that I'm like, I don't think this is a go.
Does it smell very urine-y to you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So once again, I would treat it like I would the liver. Is, if it comes to you frozen, just do a little bit. Like, don't do too much. And I would even not just soak it specifically in milk, but I would do buttermilk,
Okay.
because buttermilk is more acidic, right?
Mm,
And you can do either lemon juice as well, but something that's a little stronger is
yeah.
going to kind of help to, kind of affect that flavor a little bit and kind of pull out some of that stuff. But you're right. I mean, now there's a whole other topic that is, I think, worth bringing up, is that at what point is it the organ that is kind of challenging, and at what point is it maybe your body is just telling you you don't need this?
Right.
You know what I mean? So I think that's a constant kind of balance that we all should, and I recommend that we strive towards, which is listening to your body and what it needs. Now, granted, if your body's like, I want ice cream, is that because you literally want ice cream, or is it because you need some fat? You know what I mean? Like, so I know that there's a gray area and you need to discern it, but I like to think of like whole animal. So I really believe we all should be eating whole animal, and I believe it's one of the main deficiencies we're missing in our diets. But I want to add to that, though, is like, so if we were a tribe, I mean, for you are a tribe with 11 kids, but but like, if we were a tribe of, let's say, 35 people in our tribe, and we killed one animal, there's only one heart, there's only
Mhm.
one liver, there's only one of so many of these parts of the animal. So who's getting them out of 35 people? How much are you really getting? You know what I mean? So I always like to look at it from that perspective of like, well, it's probably going to the people that need it the most. It's probably going to those people that when they actually get it on their tongue, that it tastes really good, which means that they're probably needing that kidney support, you know?
Mhm.
So I'm just a big advocate of like, let's not worry about going all in on something, and more like, let's just try to get a little bit, like, let's just get a little doses, micro dosing, as much as we can. And at the same time, following what your own kind of intuitive eating leads you down.
So I love that because I firmly believe that our bodies have a built-in intelligence, and that, they know. And like you said, if you're craving something that is not healthy for you, you have to kind of discern, why am I craving that? I found that for me, while I did grow up with a lot of really good nutrition, I also grew up eating a lot of candy. And but I finally, as an adult, made an association that when I want fruit candy, like not chocolate, but fruit candy, Skittles or something like that, every single time I'm dehydrated. I'm
Yep.
thirsty and I'm looking for that like fruit that would have liquid in it that
Yes,
would
because it's high in
rehydrate.
water. Yeah.
Right. And so, so now I know go drink some water and that just goes away, but my body is still asking for something.
Yep.
And so, a lot of people have to kind of discern, they have to work through that on their own level. What is it? What is it that my body's asking for? But then again, like we were talking about earlier, you start getting a taste of that true nutrition and that true food, and your body's going to start going, oh, I really want it if you need it. But I love the concept that you're bringing up of kind of this ratio of organ meat to muscle meat. And this is something that I've always thought about when you hear people taking capsules every day of desiccated liver or freeze-dried liver. And it's like, at what point is enough enough? And where do you hit that level of like when you can't tell, and you can't tell on your taste buds, I've had enough, I don't need anymore. Because I do believe that God has created an animal in the right proportions, right? And
Yep.
that there's a reason there's a small amount of organ meat and a large amount. It doesn't mean we don't need the organ meat. It means that we need less, probably, because
Exactly.
there's so much nutrition in it. And so I have heard of some people doing things like throwing all of the organ meat into their grind meat if they're raising their own animal. And then every time they have ground beef or ground whatever, they're getting a little bit of the organ meat in there, not enough to affect the flavor. And, I think some of those ideas can be really good. But I want to transition to, let's cover why eating organ meat is so healthy. We're kind of just like wading right into cooking it and eating it. What is it that's in the organ meat that makes it so important for us to get?
Yeah, it's such a great question. So there's this concept, it's really an ancestral concept about like supports like. So the idea being that if you're eating the liver of an animal, then it's going to support your liver. And if you think about it, well, what is the liver's job? Well, the liver's job is to take toxins that come into our bodies and to basically, in a sense, convert them to being, I'm going to give the simplest example or explanation, but it's to convert them to water soluble forms so that they can then be excreted out of our body, whether it's through our pee or poop and our sweat, right? So detoxification pathways are really important when you're talking about the job of the liver and the kidney, because that is what they're trying to do, is get these things out of your body, but get them out of your body in a way that they can best get out, in water soluble forms. And a lot of people actually get that confused. They think that organs are where these toxins get stored. So I want to just cover that real quick, which is that it's not true. They're filtering it out, but really where these toxins get stored, if your elimination pathways aren't working, is in the fat. So that's something to really remember. And particularly if you're someone who's gained a lot of weight and who then loses a lot of weight, sometimes you can get really sick because those toxins that have been in the fat that you've been carrying around, as you lose that fat, you're detoxifying so much, it can be overwhelming. And that's one of the reasons, as I mentioned earlier, why I'm not a fan of those capsules and the people that are taking those capsules every day, is because it's guesswork. You don't know what your body, you're bypassing that innate knowledge that we talked about. And so, well, the reason why I'm bringing up the like supports like is because that organ has a job to do, and so it's packed full of the nutrients that it needs to get that job done. And in many ways we call the liver, but in general organs, they are Mother Nature's multivitamin, because when you look at what's in them, like the best way to equate it is, I say, look at what's in a prenatal vitamin. So there's like folate, there's iron, there's potassium, there's magnesium, there's vitamin A, B, all these different minerals and vitamins, right? Well, just look at what's in a prenatal. That's basically what's in organ meat.
It's very interesting. And when you look back to a lot of the traditional cultures, you see that the people who are getting fed, primarily, you were touching on this before, the people who need it, people who are getting fed the organ meats, a lot of times it's the pregnant women.
Yep. Or the
They
elderly.
knew that right at the very beginning. So it's interesting you're relating that to the prenatals, and what's in there is that, that was a knowledge based out of our physical experience, like that intelligence that we have built into our body. And I think that's just so fascinating.
Well, and what I love about the organ meats coming from a whole animal too, is that, when you take an isolated B vitamin, for example, sometimes you take some vitamins and they're like, oh, you got to take this with food. Well, that's because it's fat soluble, right? So that it needs food or fat to absorb into your body better. Well, guess what? When you get it from a whole food source, or like an animal, just like the organ meats, it's already as nature intended. It's Mother Nature created. So all the minerals and vitamins that were complementary, that are supporting each other in their absorption, the fat that's needed to provide, it's all there. You literally don't have to do much more than just eat it. So that's why I was like, hey, how do I support people? Because it's like, we're not eating it, and we are a nutrient deficient society, and this has got to change. And they've been, the US has been tracking agriculture since, I think, the 50s. And every decade you see the nutrition in produce is going down,
Right.
and there's lots of reasons for that, but they are tracking it, and they show it going down every decade. So the apple, the tomato, the produce that we're eating now is far less nutrient dense than the apple or produce that our ancestors, our grandparents, our great grandparents, our grandparents ate. So that tells me right there, you can't just expect to get your needs met by these kind of standard foods, that we're all used to. The ones we're told are so nutrient dense, like broccoli or kale or even beef or salmon. It's like, no, we need more. We need more than that.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, is there anybody who should not be consuming organ meats, like as a general class of people, or anybody who's
Well,
struggling with a health problem?
yeah, I mean, I think there's always going to be exceptions to the rule. And is it that they shouldn't be eating organ meats, or that this is more of a red flag of that something's going on? So for example, people that have gout, right? So a lot of elderly people have gout, and they're told by their doctors, don't, restrict how much red meat you eat, and organ meats, because that will flare your gout. And it's like, well, is organ meat and meat causing the gout, or is there something else going on that's been unaddressed for so long, and now you've gotten to a point where these other things exacerbate it? So I tend to look for smoke, so I tend to kind of recommend that people take note of their kind of everyday ailments, and we all have them, whether it's puffiness, like inflammation, whether it's joints, like that hurts when you move, hard to get up. When you wake up, you don't feel alert, you feel groggy. You when you eat your food, you have to go take a nap. Like these are all red flags or smoke showing you there's something going on, and you need to take a look at it. If your eyes are cloudy, and they're not bright white, your tongue, if you stick your tongue out and you see ridges on the side and you see all these different issues going on, like these are all signs. And so I think those should be cause for you to kind of check in with a nutritionist, check in with someone that's really looking at health from what you eat, and looking at health from that functional nutrition perspective, to kind of support you, so that you don't get to the point where you have someone telling you can't ever eat red meat ever again. It's like, that's not how it should be. Like, we shouldn't be in this state of alarm, all the time. But I would say also that it goes back to gout is probably the biggest one that it comes up. But there's some people, they're higher in iron, or they already have lots of vitamin A. So it's like, you would probably be like, someone like that would be someone who they go to put that organ meat in their mouth, and it's like, oh, it's just too metallic. It's like, okay, well, you should probably run a test and see what your levels are, because you might already have enough. Like, you may not need liver. But it does beg the question, well, just because you don't need liver, does that mean you don't need any organs? Like, we got to remember, like, animals are not just liver. Like when we talk about organs, it's not just liver. Like, we classify organs, or offal is another name, OFFAL. We classify that as anything, every part of the animal except muscle and bone. So bone marrow is considered part of the offal, the hoofs, the tongue, the tail, the lungs, which is tripe. All of those are considered organ meats. And so the question is, are you getting locked into one perspective, which is why I always like to talk about whole animal. Like I'm all about not just like people focus like, oh, I eat liver all the time. I'm like, yeah, well, what about heart? What about the certain joint muscles? What about tongue? What about skin? What about the blood? What about all the bone marrow? All these things. They're to me that they are extremely important. And I have not met one person yet that can't do something.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really important to differentiate all those different things. And I want to reiterate something that you said. If you are eating something that is healthy, it's good for you, maybe you've been eating it for a while, you like it, we're not having this issue of I just want Krispy Kreme donuts, but your body's craved it at some point or you've enjoyed it. And then you reach for that and you get that cringy feeling, like, just don't eat this right now. Like, that's your body saying, don't eat it right now. And we need to listen, because we actually do cause ourselves problems, whether we're talking about herbalism, we're talking about supplements. We cause ourselves problems having this perspective that, well, the blog post or the doctor or the something said this was good for me, so therefore I'm going to take it even if I feel like my body's doing that. Ooh, I don't want it right now. You need to listen to that, because that's your body trying to communicate with you. No liver right now, but maybe kidney, maybe something else, maybe who knows what it is.
And seasonality will affect that too, right?
Yes.
We crave more soups and stews during the winter, and there's a reason for that. That's when you should be using parts of the animal that break down more, when you slow cook them, things like that. There's a reason, like seasonality, intuitive eating. There's a great quote that actually Dr. Bill Schindler shared, which I love this quote, which is, "We are the only species in the world that looks to someone else to tell us what to eat."
Right. Yeah.
I mean, that says everything right there. Like I really think that if anything, and I know everyone's out there spouting their diets and what they think is the next big thing, but for my money, it's like, we got to get back to like intuitive eating. We got to get back to like, what does your body need? What does my body need? How can we move away from these ultra processed foods that are affecting and manipulating our cravings, and get back to what does our human body need?
Mm-hmm.
And for my money, it's going back to whole animal. I really believe, particularly I've been learning more about glyphosate and farming, and it's like, gosh, I just learned this. I don't know if you already know this, but so glyphosate is, typically, if you're buying organic, it's not supposed to be grown with glyphosate. But I just learned that actually it can still be that crop, whether it's like a wheat or a bean or like a legume, so grain, bean, legume, it can still be dried. They use glyphosate to dry the crop. And so you could still have an organic item, like even oats that aren't technically, don't need, technically usually aren't grown with glyphosate, but like you could have something like oats that was dried with glyphosate. So that's why they're finding glyphosate in everything. That it's not just organic or conventional. It's like, it's in everything. And so when you think of it from that perspective, like, who are the people what diet is mostly getting grains, legumes, and beans? It's the vegan vegetarian diet. So that's why I'm like, yeah, like whole animal.
Which leads us right here to this. This is the spicy one. And I've got to tell you, um, because I believe in eating organ meats, this was exciting to me when I saw it. But like I said, I was pretty skeptical. So I actually got the first package. And to tell you the truth, it sat on my shelf for
You were scared at first.
part of it. And I was like, I don't know about this. I don't know what to put it on. And now I'm like, oh, just put it on everything. Like
Everything.
we
Yeah.
salmon with it the other night, and like liberally put it over the salmon, and everybody in the house was telling me, oh, that's the best salmon ever. That was so good. But for me personally, I now have a 4-month-old baby as we're recording this. And I did something a little different in my recovery with this baby, as opposed to all the ones that came before. And I really, really focused on my nutrition in my postpartum period. And I actually had somebody in the house offered to like be my personal chef, which
Nice.
was really wonderful. So I'd written out a meal plan, what I wanted to eat. And I was eating liver specifically every day for about 2 weeks. I had a small amount of liver and my body just craved that. But I found that I was asking more and more to have this put on things also. And it was like I really needed that extra boost of nutrition. And so, anyways, I love this. And I've got to tell you that I'm hoping to try to replicate it in my own freeze dryer because I do have my own animals, um, in the that come in. We butcher everything every year ourselves, and so I end up with all this great offal. And I'm thinking, oh, what could I do to actually make some of my own? But there's so many people out there who don't have that circumstance, or like me, they may not have enough. Uh,
Yeah.
and so this is such an amazing product. So how did you get from doing what you were doing before, being that personal chef, even though you were concerned about nutrition for people? Like, what was the process that got you all the way to actually creating a product? Because that's like a change in career, essentially,
Yeah, really.
to doing this.
Yeah, it's probably too long of a process to really encapsulate, but ultimately, I was very much in the service industry. I had a meal delivery service in Los Angeles, and that service industry really took a toll on me, my health, but also I found like I was kind of incorrectly running a business. I was trying to be a private chef to everybody, and when you have a business, it like you're making a meal for 100 people, you can't cook it individually. You just can't.
No.
You can't pretend you're a personal chef to 100 people. It literally can make you insane in the kitchen, trying to break down a chili, for example, that has, 18, whatever, 12 ingredients. And like one person can't do peppers, person can't do onion, one person can only do turkey, one person is pork and beef. It's like, and you're just deconstructing that chili to the simplest form and then combining ingredients separately it was maddening. So I left that world and I was like, I don't want to have anything to do with service. Like, I don't want to deal with people's individual specific, qualities and needs. Like, I just want to create a really quality product and you either buy it or you don't, so that's where the product interest came in. But ultimately, why organ meats and why a product that makes it so easy and delicious for you to get organ meats, it was really being a father. My daughters, I have 2 daughters. One's 11, one's 7 now, but this was when they were both younger. I think the oldest was 4 or 5, and the youngest was like maybe 1.5, 2. And basically, they both got Shiga toxin, which is a form of E. coli, and it's very deadly for like young kids and for elderly people. And basically, both kids couldn't hold anything down. And I just remember the helplessness I felt as a father and as a parent, that I couldn't support my youngest, so the oldest kind of got through it within 4 days, but the youngest, it just was like, it wouldn't end. And it was like going into a full week and she was like skin and bones. It was really, really scary. And there's nothing you can really do. You can't take antibiotics. You can't do that because that will actually exacerbate, that will make it worse. And so I remember at one point she started being able to have toast. And we were like, oh my God. But then that's all she would eat, and then, because whenever, kids can get really specific once they have had thrown up. I'm sure you've known this, right? Like if a kid throws up on certain foods, they will, just like a cat will, they'll stay away from that food for a long, they almost become now biased towards whatever the food is that didn't make them throw up. Mm-hmm. And so she became basically like a toast addict. Like, she wouldn't eat anything but that. So then I was like, oh my gosh, like I wish I had something I could sprinkle on that toast that would give her more nutrition, because that toast had nothing, nothing good in it except maybe the butter, right? But it's like, I was like, what could I do? And that was the start of this. And ultimately what I did with Pluck is I took the freeze-dried powdered organ meats you find in the capsules. And as you mentioned already, it's liver, heart, kidney, spleen, and pancreas. But I combine them with spices and herbs to actually make it taste good. And it's no different than any other seasoning in terms of its shelf stableness. But as you said, you can literally just sprinkle it on anything. And so my kids, speaking about toast, they put it on their toast. We put it on popcorn. We put it on meats. I put it on oysters. We put it on fish. We put it on chicken. Like, we put it on salads. Like, you literally can put it on anything. And not only now are you getting that micro dosing of those organ meats frequently, which is cumulative effect, but you're also getting that umami. And what you just said about cooking that fish, that salmon, I get told that all the time. And I didn't know this when I created it, but I get told all the time by families, and they're like, oh, all I did this night was I just put Pluck on the recipe, and everyone freaked out. And I'm like, yeah, I think it's the umami. What happens is that because it's a unique taste, it makes the other taste pop. It makes everything taste better.
It's just amazing. And it really does on everything we've put it on. And I can totally see having it on popcorn. You've got different flavors out there. You have the all-purpose, which is just good. I mean, it's just kind of good on everything. Well, I have the spicy down here. I know I had the garlic.
Yeah, the zesty garlic. Now, the zesty garlic is kind of unique in that it's anyone can use it, of course, but I specifically made it for the people out there that can't do nightshades, like tomatoes and peppers and eggplant. They can't do nightshades, and then they can't do seeds, and that's called the autoimmune protocol, basically AIP people. But so I kind of made it for them because we were getting asked by a lot of AIP people, like, do you have anything without pepper or without, paprika or anything like that? And so I did that for them, but it's just a kind of tasty, zesty, it kind of has a ranchy taste to it. It's just so good.
Well, there's a reason why it's not here. It's because it's gone and everybody ate it.
Yeah, that one is that one, and probably all purpose. Yeah, I like having all three around, because then you can kind of go off your mood, what you feel. But then the fourth one is called Pure, and that's just the organ meat. So there's no salt in there. There's no seasonings. And for that one, I tell people, well, that's for those people that do need more kind of that 100% nutrition, kind of need to track more of what they're using. But then also, it's like, let's say you have your favorite seasoning, you can make your own Pluck with it. Just take the seasoning that your family loves, and then add as much Pluck as the organ meats as you want, until the flavor ratio feels right to you. That's really, that's kind of why that Pure exists, is just to get people to eat their nutrition versus swallow it. And then B, to support people with any kind of allergy or sensitivity or diet or, dietary preference.
I would imagine that would be a great product too, to kind of like just dip into occasionally, just in that helping your palate transition to
absolutely
liking the organ meats better.
Or to your point, if you have like your 6-month-old and you're starting to incorporate foods, you take a little bit of the Pure and just mix it into their mashes or whatever you're giving them. And now they're starting to get that flavor profile into their diet.
Oh, that's amazing. I haven't even taken it that far in my mind yet, but yeah, that is a great way to go. So, hey, you guys, Chef James has offered us very nicely a discount for you guys for jumping over there. But even if you're not interested in buying the Pluck, jump over and check out eatpluck.com for the different recipes and different resources that are over there. And Chef James, thank you so much for coming on today in this whole discussion, because it's so important. We've got to get this nutrition back into our bodies, especially our children's bodies, get them, formed up with that deep nutrition so that it can carry their health for a very long ways. So thank you for coming and chatting with us today.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right, you guys, we will see you real soon. Goodbye.